What would you do if, on the anniversary of your child's death, you returned to the place you feared and loved the most, only to discover a stranger mourning there before you, with a child who bore your son's exact eyes? Would you think it a cruel coincidence, a mistake, or would you feel something deeper, a pull, a whisper of truth buried in silence for far too long? Michael Granger didn't believe in signs. He believed in numbers, in control, in facts. That belief had built him an empire. Granger Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar firm that stretched from Manhattan skyscrapers to Hong Kong boardrooms. He had conquered markets, beaten rivals, and negotiated billion-dollar deals with an icy resolve. But there was one thing he had never managed to conquer: grief. 10 years ago, he lost his only son, Caleb, in a tragic car accident just outside Stanford University. Caleb was only 22, full of brilliance, heart, and the spark of life Michael no longer remembered feeling in himself. That day had not just shattered Michael's world, it had turned him into a shell of the father he once tried to be. His divorce followed within months, and his relationship with his daughter, Sophie, splintered into silence. Every year, on March 18th, the day that marked the end of Caleb's life, Michael flew from New York to Washington, landing quietly in Seattle and driving alone to Willowcrest Cemetery, where his son's resting place sat beneath a whispering birch tree. He never brought flowers. Caleb wouldn't have liked that. Just a polished black stone engraved with Caleb's name, birth date, and the words, "Forever, a light in the dark." But this year was different. It wasn't the weather, though the skies were grayer than usual, with a soft mist rising from the earth like breath. It wasn't even the fact that Michael had barely slept the night before, haunted by dreams he couldn't explain. No, it was what he saw when he arrived at the grave that shook the ground beneath everything he thought was steady. There was someone already there, a woman, young, maybe late 20s. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, damp from the drizzle. Her jacket was old, frayed at the sleeves, and she wore no makeup. She knelt quietly by the gravestone, her head bowed low, her shoulders trembling with soft sobs. But it wasn't just her presence that startled Michael. It was the child sitting beside her. A little boy, no older than 6, was carefully stacking pebbles at the base of the grave. He had light brown curls, a round face, and Michael's heart stopped. Those eyes, he had seen them before. He had raised them. The child looked exactly like Caleb. Michael stood frozen for a long moment, confusion and unease swirling through him like a rising storm. He cleared his throat, the sound abrupt and sharp in the quiet air. The woman turned, her eyes, red and glassy, locked with his. She blinked in panic, standing quickly, brushing the dirt from her jeans. I'm sorry," she said, her voice, soft, apologetic. "We'll leave." "I didn't know this is my son's grave," Michael said, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. His gaze shifted to the child again. "Who are you?" The woman hesitated, her hands fidgeted with the sleeve of her coat. I know who he is." Michael narrowed his eyes. "You knew Caleb?" She nodded slowly, and a shadow of pain crossed her face. "Yes, I knew him. Very well." The boy stood now, holding one of the pebbles he'd been stacking. He looked up at Michael with a quiet curiosity, completely unaware of the tension between the adults. The silence stretched, heavy and strange. "Why are you here?" Michael asked, finally. "I come here every year," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For him, for our son." The words struck Michael like a bolt of lightning. "Our son." He stared at her, the world tilting under his feet. "What did you say?" She looked down at the child, who was now holding her hand gently. "This is Eli," she said. "He's Caleb's son." Michael's heart stopped. His mind rejected it immediately. No, that's not possible. Caleb would have told him. He would have said something. But deep down, in a place Michael had buried under years of silence and sorrow, a sliver of instinct whispered, "It's true." He took a step back, the cemetery spinning slightly. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, not angrily, but with a kind of wounded disbelief. "I don't expect anything from you," she said quickly. I didn't know you'd be here. I wouldn't have come if I knew. But this is the only day I bring him. He asks questions. I wanted him to know who his father was." Michael's chest tightened. He looked at the boy again. Eli. The child looked up and offered him the small pebble he'd been holding. "This one's for him," Eli said simply. "I give him one every year." Michael reached out and took it, his hand trembling slightly. It was nothing, just a smooth, round grey stone. But it felt impossibly heavy in his palm. He didn't know what to say. His throat tightened, words retreating into silence. For the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. He felt lost. "I need answers," he finally said. "I'll tell you everything," the woman said, "but not here." Michael hesitated, then nodded. They walked together in silence to the edge of the cemetery. The boy, skipping slightly ahead, unaware that the world behind him had just turned upside down. Michael had come to mourn his son. He was leaving with something far more complicated, a truth that had waited 6 years to be found. And as they reached the gate, Michael glanced one more time at the grave. He had buried his child, but somehow, life had found its way back. What would you do if the child you thought never existed looked up at you with your own son's eyes and called someone else Mom? Michael Granger hadn't spoken a word in the 20-minute drive back to the city. The woman, her name was Lena, sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Eli had fallen asleep in the back seat, his head leaning against the window, completely unaware that his very existence had just cracked open the foundation of a billionaire's world. Seattle's skyline was a blur outside the windows, swallowed in a silver fog. Michael didn't know where he was driving. He just needed to move, to breathe, to delay the storm building behind his ribs. Lena finally broke the silence. "We can talk at my place. It's not far. I don't want to wake him." He nodded. Words still felt distant. His mind kept flashing back to the moment Caleb's name had been whispered by that boy. "I give him one every year." The pebbles still sat in Michael's pocket. They pulled into a quiet apartment complex in Fremont. Not the kind of place Michael Granger, owner of 32 luxury properties, had ever stepped foot in. The walls were old, paint peeling in spots. The stairwell echoed with each step. But the moment he stepped inside Lena's apartment, something stopped him cold. Photos, dozens of them framed, printed, pinned to a wall lined the hallway. Eli smiling at birthday parties. Eli on a swing. Eli at the beach. And in one, just one. Near the door, Caleb. A snapshot from years ago. His arm around Lena, younger, brighter, alive. His son, his only son. A version of him Michael hadn't seen in far too long. "I didn't know about you," Lena said softly. Caleb didn't talk about his family much. Michael turned slowly, eyebrows drawn. "He loved his family." She shrugged. "He loved you, maybe, but he was also afraid of disappointing you." Michael blinked. That hit harder than he expected. "Disappoint me? You wanted him to take over the company." "He didn't want that. I only wanted what was best for him." "But you never asked him what he thought was best." Her words were honest. Not cruel, not cold, just true. And it stung. Michael sat down slowly at the edge of the worn couch. Eli stirred in the bedroom, murmuring something in his sleep. "You said he was Caleb's?" he asked, staring at the door as if the answer might walk out. Lena nodded. "I met Caleb at Stanford. I was working at a coffee shop near campus. He came in every morning with his headphones on, always ordering the same thing. Vanilla latte, 2 pumps, almond milk. He hated sugar but loved vanilla. He used to joke that it reminded him of his mother." Michael swallowed hard. He remembered that. His late wife, Claire, had made vanilla cookies every Christmas. Caleb had adored them. "We dated for over a year," Lena continued. "He was so passionate about photography, about travel. He wanted to tell stories, not run board meetings." Michael closed his eyes. He could hear Caleb's voice now, asking for a gap year, begging to take a summer internship abroad instead of working at Granger HQ. "I got pregnant 6 months before the accident," she whispered. He knew. He was scared, but he was happy. "Why didn't you come to me?" Michael asked, voice hoarse. "After the accident, I tried," she said. "I called. I emailed. I even went to the building once, but the receptionist wouldn't let me pass the lobby. She said you weren't taking visitors." He felt sick. It wasn't just grief that had closed him off from the world that year, it was guilt, fear, a total shutdown of who he was. He didn't want condolences. He didn't want reminders, and because of that, he had missed a truth more important than his own pain. And then, "I thought maybe it was better that way," Lena said. "You were rich, powerful. I was just a waitress who barely made rent. I didn't want Eli to be a secret or a charity case." Michael stood, pacing the room. His hands shook slightly. This wasn't just about a hidden child. This was about everything he'd missed, because he'd buried himself in grief and ambition. He turned to her. Does he know about Caleb? Yes, as much as a 6-year-old can. I tell him stories, show him pictures. He calls him his sky. Daddy, he talks to him sometimes when he sees stars. Michael's breath caught. I wasn't trying to hide him from you, she said. I just didn't know if you'd want him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly he realized this woman wasn't here to ask for money, for help, for anything. She had carried the weight of their shared loss alone for 6 years, and yet she had raised Eli with grace, love, and dignity. Can I see him? Michael asked, not sadly. He's right through there. You can sit by him if you want. Michael walked quietly into the small room. A soft nightlight glowed from the corner. Eli lay beneath a blanket with stars on it, his curls tousled across the pillow. He looked peaceful. Michael sat in the old rocking chair in the corner and just watched. Minutes passed. He didn't expect to feel what he did, an ache. Yes, but also something else. A pull, a beginning. Eli stirred and opened his eyes. You're the man from the grave, he said sleepily. Michael nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Yes, I'm Michael. Eli smiled faintly. I liked your coat. It looked warm. Michael chuckled softly. Thanks. You did a good job with those pebbles. I do it every year. Mama says Daddy watches from the sky. Michael looked at him for a long moment. He would be very proud of you, he said quietly. Eli nodded, his eyes fluttering shut again. Mama says that too. Michael sat back in the chair, heart full of emotions he hadn't felt in years. Maybe Caleb had left more behind than just memories. Maybe he had left hope. And Michael, for the first time in 10 years, was ready to follow it. What would you do if the son you thought was lost forever left behind a mystery that refused to stay buried? Would you walk away and let the silence swallow it all? Or would you risk reopening every wound to finally uncover the truth? Michael Granger couldn't sleep. The apartment was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the heater and the soft hum of traffic beyond the window. He sat alone in the living room, a steaming cup of untouched tea in his hand, eyes fixed on the single photo he had quietly taken from Lena's wall with her permission. Caleb and Lena, arms wrapped around each other, smiling beneath a tree on campus. There was something in Caleb's face, something more than joy, a light, a freedom. It was a version of his son Michael had never truly known. The more he stared at it, the more questions rose inside him. Why had Caleb hidden this part of his life? Why hadn't he said anything about Lena, about the baby, about the dreams he was chasing that had nothing to do with business empires or stock portfolios? And then, a darker question lingered. Was the accident really just an accident? Michael tried to shake the thought away. He'd spent a decade accepting what he'd been told, that Caleb's car skidded off a rainy road, late at night, after a dinner party near campus. No drugs, no alcohol, just bad weather, bad luck. But something about Lena's story and the timing was scratching at the back of his mind. That night, Michael had been on a flight to Tokyo. He remembered getting the call mid-air, a voicemail he couldn't listen to until the plane landed. His assistant had handled everything. He never even saw the police report himself. Back then, he couldn't. He didn't want to. But now he had to. At 6:30 a.m., long before Lena or Eli stirred, Michael slipped out of the apartment. He drove across the city to the corporate office, an angular glass fortress overlooking the bay, and sat in his private office as the sun rose, casting long streaks of light across the leather and steel interior. He pulled open an encrypted folder in the digital archives. 10 years had passed, but nothing in Michael's world was ever truly gone. He found the file marked Caleb Granger, Incident Report. He hesitated before opening it. His hand hovered over the mouse, his chest tightening. What if you find something you can't undo? A voice whispered inside him. But the stronger voice, the one that had brought him this far, answered, then at least you'll finally know. The file opened. The official report matched what he remembered. But buried on the 4th page, something caught his eye. Brake failure suspected but not confirmed. Investigation halted per family request. Michael blinked. Family request. He never requested anything. He was in Tokyo when this was filed. He had signed off on a cremation authorization, but no detailed review. His assistant at the time, Rachel Linton, had managed everything. He picked up the phone and dialed her number. She had retired years ago and moved to Arizona. Still, When she answered, her voice was sharp and familiar. "Mr. Granger, I never expected to hear from you again. Rachel, I need to ask you something about Caleb's accident." There was a pause. "You know I always did what you asked." "Sir, I didn't ask for the investigation to be stopped," he said. "Did someone else?" Rachel sighed on the other end. "There was pressure, I was told, to keep it quiet. That you didn't want the media involved." "Who told you that?" Another pause. "Your brother, Sir Nathan." Michael's stomach dropped. Nathan Granger, his younger brother, coup of Granger Enterprises, trusted, loyal at least. He had been. Michael ended the call and sat in silence. Why would Nathan intervene? Why would he rush an investigation before the truth was uncovered? Unless Michael closed the file and stood. His fingers trembled slightly. He had to know more. By mid-morning he was at Lena's apartment again, this time knocking quietly. She answered, groggy but surprised to see him. "Back already?" she asked. "I need to talk to you," he said. "About the night Caleb died." Lena nodded, stepping aside. "Let me put on some coffee." They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, while Eli colored in the living room. Humming to himself, Michael leaned forward. "Did Caleb ever say he was afraid of something? Someone?" Lena's face changed, not with surprise, but with recognition. "Yes," she said slowly. "He was scared to come home. Said someone at the company was watching him." "Who?" "I don't know," she said. "But he mentioned a meeting, something that went badly. He was supposed to present some kind of report, but he said the numbers didn't add up, that someone had been hiding profits." Michael's blood ran cold. His company had been under tight scrutiny that year. A failed acquisition, a stock dip. He had blamed the market, but Caleb had been working as a junior analyst during his internship that summer, before he left for school again. He had access to those numbers. He said if he spoke up, someone powerful would make sure he was silenced. Lena continued, voice shaking. Michael stared at her, realization dawning. Caleb hadn't just left the company because he wanted to chase dreams. He had walked away because he'd seen something, and maybe he had been silenced. Michael stood, unable to sit still. "Lena, I need you to trust me. I have to find out what really happened to my son, and if what I think is true, someone I trusted might have had something to do with his death." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Then whatever you need, I'll help." He looked over at Eli, who was now drawing stars and labeling them with names. Michael's voice softened. "I couldn't protect Caleb, but I will protect his son. I swear it." And in that moment, something shifted inside him, not just grief or regret, but purpose. He wasn't just a man uncovering secrets anymore. He was a father, chasing justice. What if the person who stood beside you through every hardship had been the one quietly orchestrating your greatest tragedy? What would you do if the hand you trusted most was the one that had let your son slip through the cracks of a carefully constructed lie? Michael Granger stared across the gleaming marble table in the Granger Enterprises boardroom. It was empty, now too early for the other executives, but that was exactly what he wanted. The silence gave him room to breathe, to think, to feel the storm brewing inside his chest. His mind had been in overdrive since the conversation with Lena. His brother Nathan's name echoing louder with every piece of the puzzle that started to fall into place. Nathan had always been the charming one, calm, calculating. He knew the language of investors, the rhythm of power. When Michael was busy expanding the business into Europe, Nathan had anchored operations at home. But now, looking back, Michael began to question all of it, especially the year Caleb died. He remembered how swiftly Nathan had handled everything: press releases, memorial arrangements, even keeping the media at bay. At the time it had felt like mercy. Now, it felt like control. Michael tapped into the company's financial archives, the same system Caleb had worked in. The system was still in place, same encryption, same structure. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Hidden beneath layers of dummy accounts and cloaked spreadsheets was something no one was ever supposed to see. It started small, a discrepancy in R&D funding. Then, multiple payouts routed through subsidiaries that didn't actually exist. It stretched back over a decade, millions of dollars rerouted, and it all started to spike during the final year of Caleb's life. He knew, Michael thought. My son knew. Suddenly, a soft knock interrupted his spiral. The door opened, and Nathan stepped in. "Working early again?" Nathan said, smiling, adjusting his cufflinks. "Couldn't sleep." Michael studied him. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he gestured to the chair across the table. "Sit down." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Is this about the China proposal?" "No," Michael said quietly. "This is about Caleb." That smile froze. Only for a second, but it was enough. Nathan sat slowly. "Why now, Michael?" "I found the brake failure note in the report." Nathan's jaw clenched. "I found the halted investigation. I found the accounts. I found everything." Nathan leaned back, his voice shifting into something smoother, colder. "I did what had to be done. You were halfway across the world, drowning in grief. Someone had to keep the company standing." "You lied to me," Michael said, his voice shaking with fury. "You buried my son's death in paperwork and silence. You told Rachel to shut the investigation down." Nathan didn't deny it. Caleb was going to expose everything. He was naive, Michael. He thought truth would fix things. He didn't understand that if he blew the whistle, Granger Enterprises would have crumbled. Thousands of people, of jobs, investors pulling out our family name, everything you built. Michael stood up, eyes blazing. "So what? You threatened him." "I warned him." Michael took a step closer. "Did you touch his car?" Nathan stared at him. The pause stretched like a taut wire. "No," he said. "But I didn't stop. What I knew might happen. I let it unfold. And when it did, I made sure it didn't destroy you." Michael felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. "You let my son die to protect the company." Nathan's voice dropped, calm and deliberate. "I protected you. The company is you." "No," Michael said, shaking his head. "Not anymore." He turned and walked out, fists clenched, heart pounding. That afternoon, Michael took immediate steps. He called the board into an emergency session. It was time to reveal the corruption, time to expose what had been hidden for too long. Nathan, realizing the walls were closing in, tried to get ahead of it, pressed legal threats, claimed loyalty. But Michael had something stronger now: proof, motive, and the will to do the right thing. When the board meeting began, Michael stood at the head of the room, not as a CEO, not even as a billionaire, but as a father. He laid out the evidence, calmly and clearly. The hush in the room was deafening. He ended with a single sentence: "I built this empire to honor my family, not to bury them beneath it." By the time the meeting was over, Nathan Granger was suspended, pending a full internal and criminal investigation. But even as Michael returned to his car, a weight still lingered. Justice was beginning, but something deeper stirred inside him. Guilt. The guilt of not knowing, not asking, not seeing, of turning away when Caleb had needed him most. Later that evening, he returned to Lena's apartment. Eli was coloring again, this time on the floor beside a shoebox full of little stones. Michael smiled faintly as he sat beside him. "Can I help?" he asked. Eli grinned. "Only if you pick the flat ones. They stack better." Michael picked up a smooth, dark pebble and placed it gently atop the tower. "Like this?" "Yeah," Eli nodded. "That's a good one." Lena watched from the kitchen, her heart softening at the sight. Michael looked at the boy and whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "You're the best thing my son ever gave this world." Eli smiled, not fully understanding but sensing the love in those words, and for the first time in a decade, Michael Granger felt something bloom quietly inside him, a sense of healing. But the story wasn't over yet, because while the truth about Caleb's death was starting to surface, something even more unexpected was still waiting hidden deep within the past. A letter, a final message, and it would change everything. Asterisk, what if the person you lost had left behind one final truth tucked away, waiting to be found, not just to bring answers, but to heal a broken heart you didn't even know was still beating? What if the love you thought was gone had been guiding you all along? Michael sat at Caleb's grave, the wind brushing the trees gently above him. The cemetery was still, golden sunlight pouring through the branches, casting soft shadows on the headstone. He hadn't come here just to mourn this time. He'd come to speak, to listen, to feel. 10 years of silence had wrapped themselves around him like armor. But today, it cracked. He placed a smooth pebble on the headstone. Eli had given it to him before he left, saying it was a stone of courage. The boy had no idea how much Michael needed it. "I should have asked you what you wanted," Michael whispered. "I should have listened." Behind him, footsteps crunched along the gravel. He turned to see Lena walking toward him, holding something. In her hand, an envelope, aged and yellowed at the edges. "I think this belongs to you," she said softly. Michael stood, confused. What is it? I found it inside one of Caleb's sketchbooks, she said, her voice unsteady. It was addressed to you. I didn't read it. I thought, maybe now was the time. With trembling fingers, Michael opened it. It was written, in Caleb's handwriting, slightly messy, passionate, alive. Dad, if you're reading this, I guess something happened, and I'm sorry. I know we didn't leave things in a good place. I didn't want to fight with you. I just wanted to live a life that felt true. Not one trapped in glass towers or behind boardroom walls. I wanted to build things with my hands, with my heart, with Lena, and now we have a baby. His name's Eli. He's got your eyes. He loves the stars, just like I used to. He's the reason I breathe. If something happens to me, please find him, find her, protect them. Not with money or power, but with presence, with love, with the parts of yourself. I know you buried when Mum died. You don't have to be perfect, just be real. That would have meant the world to me. You're more than what you've built, Dad. You're still my hero. Even if I never got to say that out loud. I love you. Caleb. Michael folded the letter slowly, as if afraid the paper would disintegrate in his hands. But it wasn't the letter that broke him. It was the love. That letter undid a decade of silence. It didn't erase the mistakes, but it gave them shape, meaning, purpose. Caleb had seen him not as a cold mogul, but as a man struggling to be whole. He'd wanted his father to find his way back, and now, through Lena and Eli, he finally had. I didn't know he left that, Michael said quietly, his voice catching. He always believed in you, Lena replied, even when you didn't believe in yourself. They stood there for a while, two people connected by grief, love, and something deeper, the chance to rebuild. Later that evening, back at Lena's apartment, Eli climbed into Michael's lap with a small book in his hands. Can you read this with me? He asked. Michael smiled. I'd love to. They read together, the boy leaning against his chest, and for the first time in years, Michael didn't feel like he was running from ghosts. He was building something new. In the weeks that followed, Michael made public the entire corporate corruption scandal. He stepped down as CEO and turned the company into a foundation for ethical entrepreneurship, named the Caleb Initiative, focused on funding young creators, artists, and builders who, like his son, dreamed beyond profits. Nathan was charged, but Michael didn't gloat. He visited him in holding, said what he needed to say, and left the past behind him. He moved into a smaller home near Lena and Eli and started a life not defined by wealth, but by presence. Every morning, he walked Eli to school. Every weekend, they built things: birdhouses, toy rockets, wooden sculptures. Lena watched it all unfold, quietly, gratefully. One night, Eli looked up at him and asked, "Do you think Dad watches us from the stars?" Michael wrapped an arm around him. "I do, and I think he's proud of you." "And you?" Eli whispered. Michael nodded, voice thick with emotion. "Maybe, ... for the first time. Yes, I think he is, because healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes, it arrives in the smallest hands, through the kindest eyes, in the voices of those who are gone but never forgotten." Caleb had once been a son searching for light. Now, through his son, through the family he left behind, that light burned brighter than ever. And for Michael Granger, life didn't end with loss. It began with love, rediscovered.